She is already carrying too much when her foot lands on the tape. Not metaphorically, literally. Janet Robinson, clipboard under her left arm, phone wedged between her jaw and her shoulder, 2 equipment cases stacked in her right hand, and a folder tucked under her elbow like it belongs there. Takes 1 step into the service corridor and feels the gaffer tape give way beneath her heel. 1 millimeter of poorly fixed adhesive. 1 fraction of a second. Her body tilts. Her heart lurches. Her grip tightens on the cases. She does not fall. She laughs. That specific laugh. Dry, short, barely audible over the ambient noise of the Horizon Cultural Center during teardown. The laugh that people who carry too much, for too long, without asking anyone for anything, produce automatically. The laugh that says, fine, fine, keep going. The kind of laugh that precedes bruises. The event went well. 400 people. Standing ovation for the international speaker. The main sponsor left satisfied, which means the center's director left satisfied, which means Janet Robinson successfully managed to simultaneously replace a lighting supplier who delivered 40% of his promised equipment, redirect her entire team before the 6 o'clock start time, mediate a conflict between backstage security and the artist's assistant, and field 42 emails on a phone stuffed inside her blazer pocket. All this before she allowed herself a single glass of water. Now it is past 10. The audience is gone. The team is drifting out. She remained, as she always does, because she is always the last one. She adjusts her grip on the equipment cases, resettles the folder under her arm, picks up the slack of the phone call that she had been passively conducting for the last 3 minutes, and realizes the supplier on the other end has already hung up. She keeps walking. On the other side of the corridor, kneeling at an equipment bay, David Park is coiling an XLR cable with the methodical precision of someone who has done this particular task approximately 10,000 times. He winds the cable in a clean over-under loop, each coil the same size as the last, his hands moving without conscious instruction. This is the part of the job no one sees, and he has never minded being the person who does it. He sees everything. He sees the tape peel. He sees her foot land wrong. He sees her body correct. He sees the laugh. He stands up. He does not shout. He does not gesture broadly or make anything into a scene. He crosses the corridor in 4 deliberate steps, takes the largest of the equipment cases from her hand, then crouches to the floor, peels the tape strip clean from the concrete, and reseals it flat and firm at the corner where it belongs. He speaks without looking up at her. This was asking to trip someone. Her answer fires before she thinks about it. I'm fine. Relax. He finishes pressing the tape down. Then he stands, and he looks at her. Not at the equipment she's carrying. Not past her shoulder. At her. The kind of attention that doesn't announce itself or perform concern. It simply lands, steady and specific. I know you're fine, he says. But you almost fell. You don't have to pretend it didn't happen. Janet Robinson stands still for 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a long time, on her scale. In 3 seconds, she builds events. She restores collapsed schedules. She talks suppliers back from the edge. But in these 3 seconds, standing in a service corridor at 10 at night under cold LED light, she does none of those things. She just stands there, with a folder under her arm and a case in her hand, and the full weight of a completed workday pressing down on her shoulders. And she does not know what to do with a man who noticed something she was in the middle of erasing. She was going to pretend it didn't happen. He didn't let her. And now neither of them knows what to do with that. Tainam. If this story is already pulling something out of you, you know exactly why. So subscribe, follow, leave a comment, and help us keep making stories like this one. We write for everyone who's ever needed to feel seen. The next morning, Janet arrives 20 minutes early. This is not unusual. She arrives early to every event, every meeting, every building. Arriving first means she controls the space before anyone else can reshape it. She walks through the Horizon Cultural Center with her clipboard and her coffee, and she makes notes in the margins of the day's schedule, and the building feels like hers in those quiet minutes before the rest of the world catches up. What is unusual is that the backstage is already set. Not approximately set, not partially set. Set, cleanly and completely, in a configuration that is actually better than the one she had sketched the night before. The cable runs are organized along the wall baseboards, rather than cutting across the floor. The monitor positions leave a clear walkway to the emergency exit. The power strips are labeled with small strips of tape, the same gaffer tape from the night before, she realizes, torn into precise little flags and marked in black marker. XLR left, power main, spare. She stands in the doorway and reads every label. Then she looks at the corridor. The strip of tape on the floor, the dangerous one, the one that pulled loose under her heel, has been replaced entirely, sealed flat at all four corners with careful pressure. She would not have tripped on it even if she tried. Someone turned into an adult in here, she says to no one in particular, because she thought she was alone. We moved the monitor on channel 4, David Park says, from behind a equipment rack she had not yet looked behind. He rolls out on a wheeled stool, a screwdriver in one hand and a piece of tape between his teeth, and continues without ceremony. The old position was blocking the sightline to the prompt screen. Artist coming in this week uses it. Figured you'd want to know before the rider check. Janet has been coordinating events at this center for 3 years. She has had exactly 2 sound technicians in that time, who read the artist's rider before she asks them to. She writes something on her clipboard, not because she needs to, because it gives her something to do with her hands. The cable runs, she says. Less tripping hazard, he says. Wall-mounted where possible. She nods slowly. He goes back behind the rack. There is a clinking sound of tools, then the quiet whir of something being adjusted. She looks at the room again, at the labeled tape strips, the clear walkway, the monitor repositioned with 2 days to spare, and she has the distinct and uncomfortable sensation of being helped by someone who did not wait to be asked. That feeling, she discovers, is much harder to dismiss than she expected. She leaves the backstage before he comes back out. She tells herself it's because she has a supplier call at 9. This is true. It is not the whole truth, but she holds it like a pass, and she moves through the corridor quickly, and she does not turn back. Across the building, in the main hall, Priya Mendes is setting up the registration desk with one hand and drinking coffee with the other, glasses pushed halfway up her nose. She watches Janet move through the corridor. She watches the specific quality of Janet's stride, faster than usual, which means something just surprised her, and she sets her coffee down. She does not say anything yet. Priya has always known when to wait. But she noticed. And the thing Priya noticed, 2 weeks ago on the first day David Park arrived at the center to install the new sound system, was the precise and careful way he looked at Janet Robinson across a crowded hallway. Not with obvious interest. Not in a way that was meant to be caught. In the way of someone who has already made a quiet decision and is waiting for the right time to act on it. Priya said nothing then, either. She did not want to put pressure on a thing that needed to arrive at its own pace, but she is watching, and she knows this story, even if Janet doesn't yet. A week passes in the regular rhythm of the center. Janet coordinates 3 events, 2 of which require last-minute supplier changes. She does it without escalating, without losing her tone, without asking the director for backup. She handles a visiting artist who changes her technical requirements 24 hours before her set. She fields a complaint from the board about a scheduling overlap, resolves it within the hour, and documents the solution before anyone asks for the report. She is very good at this. She has always been very good at this. The problem with being very good at something that asks nothing of your interior life is that you can do it indefinitely, and the world will let you. David moves through the center as he always does, methodically, without noise. He carries his headphones around his neck even when he isn't operating anything. He talks to people briefly and practically. He knows where everything is. He is the person the other technicians ask when something does not make sense, not because of rank, but because he reliably knows. He has a way of solving technical problems that does not require the problem to be explained at length. He asks one or two specific questions, listens to the answer completely, and already knows the solution before the person finishes speaking. On Thursday, Janet's regular coffee thermos turns up in the staging area next to her clipboard. She had left it in the green room after the morning briefing. She had not gone back for it. She had not mentioned it to anyone. It appeared beside her clipboard without explanation, at exactly the moment she needed it most, mid-afternoon, between the second event debrief and the start of the dinner setup, when her energy was operating on stubbornness alone. She picks it up. She looks at it. She looks around the staging area. Empty. She drinks the coffee. Then she picks up her clipboard and goes back to work and does not mention it. On Friday, she starts changing her routes through the building. She would not call it avoidance if pressed. She would call it efficiency, taking the east corridor instead of the west one because it cuts 30 seconds off her walk to the loading dock, and 30 seconds matters during an active setup. This is a reasonable argument. It also happens to route her away from the backstage area where David Park is most often found. What she does not know, because she is too busy managing the distance to examine why she is managing the distance, is that David noticed the pattern on day 2. He does not confront it. He does not adjust his position to intercept her new routes. He goes about his work in the backstage, in the equipment rooms, in the technical corridor, and he learns that whenever he is in a space, she finds a reason not to be. He files this information away with the same calm attention he gives everything else. He does not decide it means she dislikes him. He decides it means something happened in the corridor that night, that she is still figuring out what to do with. He can wait. He is used to giving things the time they need. On Friday evening, Yoon Tae-young finds him rewiring the main board after a long day and sits on a nearby equipment case with 2 cans of canned coffee from the vending machine. "She's avoiding you," Yoon says, handing him a can. David opens it without looking up from the board. "She's processing." "How do you know the difference?" "Avoidance without processing looks like coldness," David says. "She's not cold, she's careful." Yoon watches him for a moment. He has known David for 9 years, since David was a technician's assistant with headphones twice the size they needed to be. He knows the difference between David being indifferent and David paying attention. The headphones are around his neck. He is paying attention. "Don't wait too long," Yoon says. "I know," David says. He does not say he is afraid of arriving wrong. He does not have to. Yoon already knows that story. It is his story too, from a different time and a different center, and a different person whose name he does not say anymore. He drinks his canned coffee and watches his mentee work, and wonders if this one will have the courage to do what he didn't. Mo? The supplier call goes badly on a Tuesday. Marcus, the equipment supplier Janet has worked with for 14 months, who has always been difficult but reliable, which in this industry counts as a gift, calls 20 minutes before a venue walkthrough to inform her that the main speaker array she confirmed 3 weeks ago is unavailable. His warehouse delivered it to another client in error. He is sorry. He will send what he has. What he has is approximately 60% of what she needs. Janet stands in the parking bay of the cultural center with her phone to her ear and a vendor inventory list in her hand, and she works through the problem in real time, verbally, with the kind of focused speed that comes from having solved this exact category of crisis too many times to waste energy on feeling it. She identifies 2 alternative suppliers. She negotiates a partial arrangement on the spot. She calls the artist's manager with a revised technical setup and manages the conversation without the manager losing confidence in the event. By the time she walks back into the center, the problem is resolved. No one saw it. No one asks. She passes the coffee station and stops for a moment. She is thirsty. She had not noticed until now. "Rough call?" David says. She turns. He is at the end of the hallway, coiling a cable, always coiling cables, always doing the quiet necessary work. and he does not look up when he asks. She didn't think he had seen her face. He apparently did not need to. Supplier issue, she says. Resolved. Good. She goes to the water station. She fills her thermos. She is 3 steps away when he speaks again, still coiling, still not looking up. You know the world doesn't actually need you to pretend it was nothing. She stops. I'm not pretending, she says, and the precision of her tone is its own kind of armor. Okay, he says. That's it. Just, okay. No argument, no pressing. He finishes the coil, sets it with the others, and picks up the next one. He is not testing her. He is not building to something. He simply said the thing that needed saying, once, and has left the door at whatever angle she chooses. She stands there for a moment longer than is strictly necessary before she continues walking. Later, in the quiet of the supply closet where she goes when she needs 3 minutes to be no one's coordinator, she sits on a storage crate and stares at the shelving and thinks about the phrase he used. The world doesn't need you to pretend it was nothing. Not, you don't have to do this. Not, let me help. Just a plain statement of fact, addressed to no one, in a corridor without asking for anything from her. She realizes she cannot remember the last time someone said a true thing to her without wanting something for it afterward. She is not sure what to do with that. She suspects, with the faint alarm of someone who has been careful for a long time, that she is going to have to find out. Priya appears in the doorway with 2 cookies wrapped in a napkin and sits down on the crate next to her without saying anything. She pushes 1 cookie toward Janet's hand. Janet takes it. They sit in the quiet for 2 minutes. It is, Janet thinks, the most honest conversation she has had in weeks. There is an event on Saturday that begins to fall apart at 4 in the afternoon. The venue's own soundboard, the one the center rents for large-scale productions, develops a fault in the main input channel 40 minutes before soundcheck. The board technician on duty cannot identify the source. The artist's production manager is in the green room sending increasingly urgent messages. The director has invited 3 board members to the event as a demonstration of the center's expanded technical capacity. Janet finds this particular combination of variables when she walks through the stage door at 4:15 after resolving a catering dispute at the loading dock. She takes 1 look at the board technician's face and knows. She does not panic. Panic is a luxury that event coordinators learn to recondition very early. She goes to the technical wing and finds David. He is already there. He is already at the board. Input board fault, main channel, she says. Grounding issue, he says, without looking away from the board. Internal, not the cable. I need 8 minutes and a Phillips head screwdriver in size 2. 8 minutes is tight. 7 if you get me the screwdriver. She gets him the screwdriver. She stands at the entrance of the technical wing and manages the perimeter, keeps the production manager's messages from reaching the director, redirects the board members toward the gallery exhibition in the lobby, buys the time. 7 minutes and 40 seconds later, David's voice comes through the stage monitor speaker testing, clear and grounded and exactly where it should be. She walks back into the wing. He is closing the board panel. You could have led with the fact that you already knew what it was, she says. I wasn't sure yet, he says. I didn't want to name a problem before I could give you the solution. She looks at him for a moment. That is a very specific professional philosophy. I've watched a lot of people announce problems dramatically and then disappear, he says. I'd rather be the person who solves it quietly. This is, she recognizes, precisely what she does. Has done for 3 years. She is looking at herself in a different configuration, and she does not have an immediate response to that. The board members? He asks. Gallery tour. They'll assume it was planned. He almost smiles. It is not the full version, just a small uplift at the corner of his mouth that he doesn't quite complete. But it is there, and she catches it. She leaves before she can catalog what it does to the specific tension she has been carrying in her chest since the corridor with the tape. The event runs perfectly. The artist performs to a full house. The board members leave impressed. The director sends Janet a 2-line email that evening that says simply, Well done tonight. I noticed. It is the most direct praise Janet has received from Carmen Vasconcelos in 3 years of employment, and she reads it twice in the parking lot before she starts her car. What she does not know is that Carmen Vasconcelos watched the 415 crisis from the mezzanine level. She watched Janet and David move through the problem in under 8 minutes without a single raised voice. And she has been thinking about it ever since. The gala for the center's anniversary takes place on a Thursday evening, and Janet has been preparing for it since September. By 8 o'clock, with 280 guests in the main hall, 3 speeches underway, and a catering team operating at the exact ceiling of its capacity, something goes wrong with the lighting rig above the stage. Not catastrophically wrong. One of the follow spots develops a flicker, and the guest of honor is currently standing directly beneath it. Not dangerous, but visible. And in a room full of people who are deciding how much to donate to the center's programming fund, visible is the same as catastrophic. Janet is in the back corridor when she hears about it through her earpiece. She processes the information and turns toward the stage. She does not reach it. The hallway behind the main stage is narrow and crowded during a live event, and she has to move carefully to avoid cutting through a group of donors being escorted by a board member. She does this. She redirects. She finds a side passage. She comes out the other side of the corridor into the wings, where the lighting controller is, and she stops. The flicker is gone. The follow spot is stable. David is beside the lighting controller, one hand on the board, speaking quietly to the lighting technician. He sees her come through the door. Fixed, he says. Ballast connector was loose. 40 seconds. I heard it through the earpiece 2 minutes ago, she says. I was already here when the call went out, he says. I caught it before it escalated. She looks at the stage, at the guest of honor speaking smoothly beneath a steady light, at the room full of people who do not know that anything went wrong. She breathes. Come here, David says. It is not a command. It's an invitation. He takes 2 steps to the side, into the deeper shadow of the stage wing, away from the lighting board and the technician, and the hum of the event. She follows him, which surprises her, because she almost doesn't. They stand in the narrow quiet of the wing, close enough to feel the difference in temperature from the main hall, and he leans against the wall and looks at her. 5 minutes, he says. You don't have to solve anything for 5 minutes. There are 280. Priya has the front of house, he says. Yoon has the board. The gala will run for 5 minutes without you. She wants to argue. She opens her mouth to produce the argument and finds it has gone somewhere she cannot reach. Her shoulders drop approximately half a centimeter, which is, for Janet Robinson, the physical equivalent of a full collapse. She stands in the wing and does nothing for 5 minutes. She does not produce her clipboard. She does not check her phone. She stands in the dark beside a man who noticed that she needed this and said so directly, and she lets the gala happen without her for the first time in 3 years. When she comes back out, everything is fine. She knew it would be. That is not the thing that stayed with her. What stayed was the 5 minutes themselves, the willingness of someone to offer them without making her feel like a failure for needing them. She had forgotten that those 2 things could coexist. Priya sees her face when she comes back out. She does not say anything. She just pushes her glasses up her nose and nods. Janet spends 3 days after the gala rebuilding the distance. She knows she is doing it. This is different from before. Before, she was simply operating on instinct, rooting herself away from someone who saw too much, because seeing too much is a threat she has learned to treat as such. Now she is doing it consciously, deliberately, with the full knowledge that it is a choice and not a reflex, and she does it anyway. She tells herself it is because she cannot afford the complication. She is in the middle of planning the center's biggest quarterly event and a potential partnership with 2 external venues, and this is not the time to... She stops herself from finishing that thought, because the thing it ends in is the admission that there is actually something to complicate, and she has not yet allowed herself that word. She roots herself through the east corridor. She schedules her backstage visits for times she knows he will be in the equipment room. She acknowledges him in group settings with the precise professional warmth she uses for all the contractors. Efficient, friendly, measured, equal to everyone, special to no one. David notices the pattern on day 1. He does not mention it to her. He does not alter his own movements to intercept her. He continues his work. But on the 3rd day, during a team briefing that they are both required to attend, he sits at the opposite end of the table from her, and when she speaks about the quarterly event logistics, he listens with the same quality of attention he gives everything, complete, specific, and undisguised. She feels it the whole time she is speaking. She does not look at him. After the briefing, walking back to the coordination office, Priya falls into step beside her. "You changed your routes," Priya says. "I found a shorter path to the... Janet." She stops. Priya is looking at her with the expression she wears when she is about to say something that has been waiting. She pushes her glasses up her nose. "You shrink," Priya says, "every time someone gets actually close. It lands like something physical. Not cruelly. Priya does not know how to be cruel, but precisely. The kind of precise that cannot be absorbed and dismissed, only absorbed and carried." "I'm not shrinking," Janet says. "You rerouted yourself through the loading dock every day this week," Priya says. "The loading dock, Janet. That's 15 extra minutes and you smell like diesel. You are absolutely shrinking." Janet looks at her for a long moment. There is no counter to this. She knows there is no counter to this because Priya is not wrong, and they have known each other long enough that lying would be an insult to the friendship. She says nothing. She turns and walks to the coordination office. She sits at her desk and opens her laptop and stares at the quarterly event spreadsheet until the letters stop meaning anything. She is afraid, she realizes. Not of David specifically. Afraid of what happens when someone sees you clearly and you let them. Afraid of being visible and then losing it. Because at least if you never have it, you never miss it. She spent years getting good at not having it. She is very, very good at not having it. There is also a smaller, more specific fear she will not look at directly. The fear of being misread. Of someone constructing a version of her from the parts that are visible. The competent exterior, the solving, the forward motion, and falling for that version, not the one underneath it. She has been the competent version so consistently, for so long, that she is not entirely certain the other version is still legible. She is not sure she could produce it on request. This is, she knows, a significant problem. Because the man in the backstage is not responding to the competent exterior. He asked how she felt about the project. He noticed the specific quality of her laugh in a corridor at 10 at night. He said the world doesn't need you to pretend it was nothing, which is the kind of sentence that assumes there is a someone underneath the function worth addressing. She is afraid that if she lets him address her, the actual her, not the version with the clipboard, he will find out she is less certain than she appears, and the whole architecture of the last 3 years will feel like a performance she can no longer justify. The clipboard sits on her desk. She opens the quarterly event spreadsheet. She starts working, because she always does. Tadisas. 2 days after the hallway conversation, Priya finds Janet at the supply station at 7 in the morning, refilling her thermos, and looking at the wall in a way that suggests she has been looking at the wall for a while. "I'm going to say the whole thing," Priya announces, sitting down on the counter. "Good morning, Priya." "You have a gift for not seeing when someone is looking at you," Priya says. "I'm not talking about professionally. I mean him. David. He has been looking at you since his first day here, and you have constructed an entire obstacle course to avoid having to deal with the fact that someone decided not to look away." Janet fills her thermos. She caps it. She holds it. "He's a contractor," she says. "So was the sound technician at the Pinheiros venue, and you had dinner with his whole team last year. That was a group dinner you organized specifically so you could manage the relationship without any one person getting close." "Yes, I know. I was there." Priya adjusts her glasses. "Janet, listen to me. You've been doing this, making yourself the organizer, the fixer, the last person in the building, since before I met you. And it works. You're extraordinary at it. But at some point, extraordinarily functional becomes a way to avoid anything that can't be put on a clipboard. The supply station is quiet. Down the hallway, the building is beginning its morning life. Voices, doors, the percussion of a setup day. Janet looks at her thermos. "What if I'm not interesting enough for what he thinks he's seeing?" she says. Not a question. A statement she has been holding somewhere she could not name. Priya goes still. This is not the answer she expected. This is a better, truer answer, and she knows it. "He reorganized the backstage before you arrived so you wouldn't trip again," Priya says, slowly, evenly. "He got your coffee without being asked. He offered you 5 minutes in the wing and held the space without making it about himself. Janet, that is a man who looked at what you actually do every day and then quietly rearranged the environment to make it safer. That is not a man who thinks he's seeing something that isn't there." Janet's grip on her thermos is very, very controlled. "You deserve to be seen," Priya says. "You do. Not in a way that demands you perform gratitude or become smaller or explain yourself. Just seen. The way he's been trying to do since the tape, if you'll stop rerouting yourself through the loading dock long enough to notice." She slides off the counter, picks up her coffee, goes to push her glasses up, then stops. "He's going to leave eventually," Priya says. "The contract ends in 6 weeks. So whatever you're waiting for, whatever perfect moment where it feels safe enough, you might want to adjust your timeline." She leaves. Janet stands in the supply station alone. 6 weeks. She had known this. She had not let herself think about it directly, because thinking about it directly would mean admitting there was something to lose. She picks up her clipboard, puts it down again, picks it up again. She does not go to the backstage. Not today. But she goes to the window in the coordination office and stands there for a full minute, looking out at the courtyard where the center's maintenance crew is setting up outdoor chairs for the weekend event. They are working in the same efficient quiet as David, not performing diligence, simply performing the work. She has always respected that. She has always been that. The question she cannot answer is what it costs, not the work itself. She knows the cost of the work, down to the hour. What she cannot quantify is the cost of the version of herself she assembled to do it. The version that does not slip, does not need, does not ask. The version that laughs instead of sitting down for a moment and admitting that the fall would have actually hurt. She knows she built it herself. She is not a person who hides from accountability. She built the armor deliberately, over years, after specific incidents that she rarely revisits and never explains. Not because she has forgotten, but because she moved on, and moving on required not spending time in the evidence. She is good at forward motion. The problem with forward motion, Priya once told her, is that it works on everything except what's chasing you. She sets down the clipboard, walks to the backstage. Director Carmen Vasconcelos schedules the meeting for 11 on a Wednesday. When Janet walks into the director's office, she expects a budget conversation. The center's board has been applying pressure about the quarterly costs, and Janet is the person who manages those numbers on the ground level. She comes prepared with a detailed breakdown and 3 proposed adjustments. Carmen does not ask about the budget. She asks Janet to sit. She closes the door. She sits across from her at the desk and folds her hands and looks at Janet the way she has been looking at her since the gala, with an evaluative precision that is not cold, but is very clear. "I want you to lead the 1-month project," she says. The 1-month project is the center's flagship programming event, a 4-week cycle of performances, exhibitions, and cultural talks that draws the highest attendance of the year and represents the center's most significant external partnership opportunity. It has always been led by the director herself, with a team of 4 or 5. It is the kind of responsibility that changes a career. Janet's first response, before her professional instincts manage it, is something close to fear. "I'm honored," she says. "Can I have until Friday to consider?" "No," Carmen says. The directness of it is startling enough that Janet stops mid-sentence. Carmen unfolds her hands. I saw you once, she says, trying to carry everything alone in the service corridor after the international speaker event. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest. You were the last person in the building, and you were carrying 3 people's worth of equipment without asking anyone for anything. She pauses. I almost came down to say something. I didn't, because I wanted to see what you did with it. Janet is very still. Then I saw what you did the next day, Carmen says. And the day after. You reorganized the supplier chain. You caught the lighting fault at the gala before the board noticed. You managed the anniversary event with fewer resources than I gave you, and you didn't escalate once. And then I watched you during the 4:15 board fault. She looks at Janet without looking away. I know you didn't do that alone, but the way you moved through it, that is not a coordinator. That is a producer. The 1-month project has always been, I want it to be yours, Carmen says. Co-led, the first year, me and you, with full credit on the programming. She leans forward slightly. But you have to actually want it. Not manage it at arm's length from behind a clipboard. Actually want it. In front of people, with your name on it. Janet looks at the director. At the vintage microphone brooch on her lapel, which she has never explained, and Janet has never asked about. At the hands folded on the desk, precise and still. She opens her mouth to say she needs time. Then she closes it. She thinks about Priya's voice in the supply station. Whatever you're waiting for, you might want to adjust your timeline. She thinks about 6 weeks. She thinks about a man who reorganized a room so she wouldn't get hurt and never said a word about it. Yes, she says. Carmen nods once. She does not make it a celebration. That is not her way. But when Janet stands to leave, the director says quietly, I was you once. I waited too long on both fronts. Don't. Janet doesn't ask what she means by both fronts. She is fairly sure she already knows. She tells David the next morning. Not because she is required to. The project team will be assembled formally at a broader meeting Friday. She tells him specifically, in the backstage, where he is checking the cable inventory for the week's events, because she walked to the east corridor, then stopped, then turned around and came back west. I took the lead on the 1-month project, she says. He looks up from the inventory sheet. He does not say congratulations immediately, which, she realizes, she would have preferred less than what he actually does. He just watches her face, reading something in it. How do you feel about it? He says. Terrified, she says. It is the first time she has named a thing before managing it in front of anyone. The word comes out plainly, without decoration, and hangs in the air of the backstage between labeled cable coils and gaffer tape strips, and she does not take it back. He nods, not in the way that dismisses the feeling, but in the way that confirms it was worth saying. The world doesn't give much back when you disappear into the work, he says. This is the right call. You don't know that, she says. I know what the work looks like when someone who actually cares is running it, he says. I've worked at 6 venues in 4 years. You are the reason this one runs. He sets down the inventory sheet. I also know it's a lot, but you're not going to do it alone, right? She almost deflects. The deflection is already forming. Something professional. Something measured. She can feel it organizing itself. Right, she says instead. She picks up her clipboard and goes back to her desk and sits down and looks at the 1-month project brief she has already started annotating. Her handwriting in the margins is different than usual. Less controlled, slightly larger. Like someone who is writing toward something instead of around it. The project team is assembled by Monday. David is assigned as lead technician for the full 4 weeks. A decision Carmen makes and Janet does not question, because questioning it would mean explaining why. And she cannot explain why, without arriving at the place she has been carefully approaching from 3 different angles for the past 3 weeks. Yoon Tae-young, who is the senior technician and who recommended David for the center's installation contract 4 months ago, claps David on the shoulder when the assignment is announced and says nothing, which is how Yoon communicates his most important thoughts. The project begins on a Monday. By Wednesday, Janet has written 47 new items on her clipboard list and crossed off 39 of them. She has called 4 suppliers. She has redesigned the first week's program flow twice to account for a venue timing conflict. She has also, twice, accepted a cup of coffee she didn't ask for without immediately explaining that she was fine without it. The technical writer for the second event arrives with 17 amendments the artist's production manager failed to mention in advance. Janet reads through them at 7 in the morning, calculates the equipment gap, and starts making calls. By 9 o'clock, she has resolved 14 of the 17 amendments. The remaining 3 require hardware that the center does not own. She goes to the backstage. David is already reading the same writer. He has a pencil in his hand and marks on the page, and his headphones are around his neck at the angle they take when he is concentrating. He looks up when she comes in, and she sees by his expression that he has already reached the same 3 problems. "Speaker array," he says. "I know," she says. "I called Yoon. His company has the units. He can have them here by Thursday afternoon. The event is Thursday evening." "I know," he says. "It'll be tight, but it'll work." She looks at him. He has been, she realizes, thinking about her problems for longer than she has given him credit for. Not managing them for her. He has never done that. Never moved in without her involvement. He is thinking alongside her. As if her logistical life is something he has made space for in his own mind, the way you make space for the concerns of someone who matters. She makes a note on her clipboard. "Tell Yoon thank you," she says. "Tell him yourself," David says. "He'd like that." She does that afternoon on the phone. Yoon Tae-young has a laugh that sounds like someone knocking over a good-natured chair, and he tells her he has been hearing about this project from David for weeks, and that she should know she has a real advocate in her corner. She thanks him. She hangs up. She sits with that word, advocate, for a moment, before she goes back to work. It is a very small thing. She is aware that it is a very small thing. She is also aware that small things, done consistently, are how rooms get reorganized without anyone being alarmed. The first event of the 1-month project opens on a Friday. It is the most technically complex event the center has produced in 18 months. A live music performance paired with a visual art projection, requiring audio, lighting, video, and stage management to operate in precise synchronization. 500 people. 3 sponsors, including one who is present for the first time, and whose partnership the center has been cultivating for a year. Carmen Vasconcelos is in the audience, seated in the 3rd row, which means she is both supporting and evaluating at the same time. At 6:40, 20 minutes before showtime, the video projection system goes down. Not partially, completely. The projection technician locates the fault in a processing unit and confirms that it needs a hardware replacement that they do not have on site. Janet receives this information through her earpiece while standing at the stage entrance with her clipboard and a radio, and the specific look of someone who has been here before and knows exactly how expensive this moment is. She turns to the technical wing. David is already there. He is on the phone, speaking quietly, and he holds up 2 fingers without looking at her. 2 minutes. She turns back to the stage. She manages the stage manager, manages the sponsor's liaison who is beginning to look nervous, manages the artist's production team. She buys 3 minutes. She is very good at buying time. When she reaches 2 minutes and 30 seconds, the projection lights up behind the stage. Clean, full spectrum, perfectly calibrated. She looks at David. "Borrowed a backup drive from Yoon's van," he says. "It was 2 blocks away. You called him before I knew there was a problem. I heard the processor fan change pitch 20 minutes ago," he says. "I was already concerned. I just didn't want to worry you before I knew." She exhales. It is not a professional exhale. It is the real one. The one that acknowledges the full weight of the last 3 minutes and releases it. He sees it. The show begins 40 seconds early, which counts as on time in live events. It is extraordinary. The music and the projection move together as if they were composed for each other, which they were, and the audience understands this in the deep way that live art enters the body rather than the mind. At the end, there is a silence before the applause. That specific held silence of people who have just experienced something they will remember. Janet is standing in the wings, watching the audience. She does not notice that she has stopped holding her clipboard. It is hanging at her side, forgotten. In the soundboard talkback, before the final bow, David's voice comes through the monitor feed. Steady, quiet, without drama. "Good work tonight, everyone," he says. "We're here because of her." 500 people do not hear this. The team hears it. Janet hears it from the wings. She does not fall. But she trembles, just slightly, in the way of something that has been holding its weight for a very long time and is finally being allowed to put it down. She stands in the dark of the wings, and she does not move for a moment. Then she straightens, picks up her clipboard, and she walks out to take her bow. The 4 weeks move differently than any month she has worked at the center before. Not because the work is less, it is more. More events, more logistics, more supplier coordination, more nights that end past 11. What is different is the quality of the weight. She has always worked hard. She has not always had the sense that the work belongs to her, rather than the other way around. Her name is on the programs. Carmen insisted on this. For the first 3 days of the project, every time Janet saw the credit line, produced by Janet Robinson and Carmen Vasconcelos, she had the strange sensation of waiting for someone to correct it. By the end of the first week, the sensation stopped. She also stops rerouting through the East Corridor. This happens without a decision, which is how she knows it is real. One morning, she simply takes the West Corridor, the shorter one, the one that passes the backstage, and she walks at her normal pace, and when she passes the backstage doors, she does not accelerate. David is inside. She can hear the quiet of someone working. She does not go in, but she does not avoid it. This is the difference. They develop a working rhythm that has never been formally discussed, but operates with the efficiency of a system they have both internalized. She sends him the technical writers 24 hours before the event. He sends her the equipment confirmations within the hour. During live events, their earpiece check-ins are brief and specific. No excess, no performance. She knows where he is at any point in a show by the simple fact that the technical elements are running correctly. There is a particular quality to working alongside someone who does not need to be managed. Janet has spent her career surrounded by capable people. Priya, who is warm and perceptive and deeply reliable, and who supports her without question. Carmen, who is demanding and fair in equal measure. Marcus, who is difficult and necessary. Yoon, who is steady in the background way of people who have seen enough crises to stop being surprised by them. She is good with all of them. She has built a functional ecosystem of professional relationships. What she has not had, in any of those relationships, is the specific experience of someone who understands how she thinks before she explains it. Not finishing her sentences. That would be intrusive. And he is not intrusive. Simply operating in the same direction. When she shifts the running order, he has already adjusted the sound plan. When a technical problem emerges, his solution accounts for the event's arc, not just the fault. When she is in the wing and the show is running, and she needs to make a call, the information she needs from him arrives before she forms the question entirely. She does not mention this to him at first. It feels too large to name casually, and she has learned from him, slowly, that the things worth naming are worth naming at the right moment, rather than the nearest one. On the third Wednesday, a water bottle appears on Janet's coordination desk. She did not bring it. She knows whose it is, and she does not return it. She sets it where it is visible, and she uses it through the whole morning, and at the end of the day, she refills it and leaves it on the desk. The next morning, it is gone. She finds hers, full, in its place. Priya passes the desk, sees the bottle, and says nothing. She just pushes her glasses up and continues walking with the small, precise nod of a person whose prediction has arrived on schedule. On the last Friday of the project, the closing event, the biggest of the 4 weeks, everything works. Not because nothing goes wrong. 3 things go wrong between the setup and the show, and all 3 are resolved before anyone in the audience knows they existed. The closing event is the best thing the center has produced in years. Carmen Vasconcelos stands at the end and applauds with the sponsors and the board and the 500 people who are on their feet. And then she looks at the wings where Janet is standing, and she nods. Janet nods back. It is an exchange that happens in 2 seconds. It contains 3 years' worth of being correct about something neither of them said out loud. After the audience leaves, after the sponsors finish their reception, and the board members find their cars, after the setup crew begins the teardown, the center settles into the specific quiet of a building that has just done something it is proud of. Janet is in the staging area writing the post-event report. She is still there at midnight. The team has gone. The building is mostly dark. She hears footsteps in the corridor. If you're still here at midnight with them, you already know. Stay with me. She knows his footsteps by now. She is not going to examine how she knows this. She simply does. The specific weight and pace of someone who moves through a technical space with precision and no hurry. She could pick it out of a crowd. He appears in the doorway of the staging area with 2 paper cups of coffee from the reception and the headphones around his neck as always. Building's empty, he says. I know, she says. I have the post-event report. I know, he says. He sets one of the paper cups on the edge of her desk, leans against the doorframe. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Why did it take you so long to believe you were allowed to be good at this? She puts her pen down. She looks at him. That's a large question for midnight in an empty building, she says. We have time, he says. They have time. The contract ends Monday. They both know this. Because being good at it meant being visible, she says. It is the most direct thing she has said to him. She says it the way she said terrified in the backstage 3 weeks ago, plainly, without the management. And visible meant someone could see exactly where to aim. She picks up the coffee. You grow up learning that if you need less, you lose less. If you want nothing publicly, no one can publicly take it from you. It's very efficient. Until it isn't, he says. Until it isn't, she agrees. He pushes off the doorframe. He walks to the desk and sits in the chair across from her. Not beside her, not crowding the space, across, in the way he does everything, with the precise attention to where he is in relation to her. I saw you on the first day I was here, he says. She goes still. Not the corridor. Before that, the day I arrived to do the installation assessment. He holds his coffee cup in both hands. You were in the hallway arguing with a supplier on the phone, and you were doing it calmly, which I have since learned means the conversation is actually extremely difficult. And you had your clipboard under your arm and a pen behind your ear, and you had your gold earring only on the left side, and you looked like someone who has won too many arguments they shouldn't have had to fight. She looks at him across the desk. I spent 2 weeks deciding how to show up, he says. Because I have done this wrong before. I have arrived too fast, too loud, in a way that made someone feel like a project. I didn't want to do that to you. I wanted to arrive in a way that gave you the choice. He is looking at her directly. The tape was not a strategy. It was just a tape. But when you laughed, that specific laugh, I knew. He pauses. I knew that you would be the last person to ask anyone to notice. Janet Robinson sits in the empty staging area of the Horizon Cultural Center at 12 past midnight with an almost finished post-event report on her desk and a paper cup of coffee in her hand, and she does not say anything for a moment. Not because she is afraid of what comes next. For the first time in a very long time, she is not afraid. She is simply letting herself feel the full weight of being seen by someone who went slowly enough that she could choose to stay. I had already decided to be ignored, she says. I had made it very comfortable and very organized, and I had convinced myself it was peace. Is it? No, she says. He nods. He does not push forward. He has never pushed forward. He is still and present, and exactly as close as she has allowed him to be, waiting for her to decide what happens next. She puts down the coffee. She slides the post-event report to the side of the desk, not in the drawer, not closed, to the side to be finished later. It is a small gesture. He sees it. "I'm going to say something that I have not said in approximately 4 years," she says. "Okay," he says. "I think I needed this," she says. "This. Tonight. You, here, at midnight, telling me you spent 2 weeks figuring out how to arrive without startling me." She meets his eyes. "I think I have needed someone to do it that carefully for a very long time." He sets his own cup down. He reaches across the desk and covers her hand with his, not taking it, just landing there, the same way he landed in the corridor that night, steady and undemanding, a presence that is offering without requiring. She turns her hand over. She holds on. 2 years later, on the same stage, he would hand her a small box. It would be after the center's anniversary performance. A show she produced alone this time, with her name first in the program, with Carmen Vasconcelos sitting in the 3rd row by choice, applauding before anyone else did. It would be after the audience left, and the team drifted out, and the building settled into the familiar quiet of a space that had just done something worthy of itself. He would set the box on the edge of the stage, in the low blue light of the post-show LEDs, with his headphones around his neck as always. And the first thing he would say, before she even opened it, would be, "That night, you almost fell." Because that night was where it started. Because for him, the beginning of everything was not a speech or a grand gesture, or a carefully timed revelation. It was a strip of poorly fixed tape on a corridor floor, and a woman who laughed instead of asking for help, and his decision, quiet and deliberate, not to pretend he hadn't seen, not to let the moment pass. There are moments that do pass. Everyone has them. The hallway conversation not started, the question left unasked, the person who looked at you and waited for you to look back and then turned away. We spend a lot of time believing those moments are lost. Sometimes they are. Sometimes the timing is genuinely wrong, and the kindest thing the world can do is let something not happen. But sometimes the timing is exactly right, and we are simply afraid. Afraid of being seen clearly and then losing the clarity. Afraid of being known and found wanting. Afraid of asking for what we actually need, and discovering that the world will respond, which is somehow scarier than not asking, because then we have to live in the reality where we are allowed to have things. Janet Robinson spent years building a life around not asking. She was extraordinary at it. She coordinated 400 people with her phone in her blazer pocket, and her feet never stopped moving, and no one ever asked how she was doing. And it worked, until it didn't. Until a man with headphones around his neck and a Phillips head screwdriver knelt on a corridor floor and fixed a strip of tape and said, "You don't have to pretend it didn't happen." And something in her remembered that being seen without being consumed was possible. David Park spent years arriving quietly, doing the work no one names, waiting until he knew how to show up without becoming one more person someone had to manage. He had arrived wrong before, too fast with too much weight, and he had learned the specific cost of that. So he learned to be patient. He learned to reorganize the room before she got there. He learned to offer 5 minutes in a stage wing, not as sacrifice, but as evidence that he understood what she needed. They were, for a long time, 2 people living in the same wound with different names. Both had learned not to ask for the thing they actually wanted. Both had confused functional with finished. Both had told themselves that peace was the absence of risk, rather than the presence of someone worth risking for. The tape was not a metaphor when it happened. It just pulled loose, the way things that are fixed in haste eventually do, and she almost fell. And he saw. But it became a metaphor. Everything they chose to do carefully after that night became the opposite of haste. The small, deliberate actions of 2 people who had done the rushed version before and knew what it cost. The labeled tape strips, the water bottle, the 5 minutes, the west corridor taken again, the clipboard set aside, The word, yes, said plainly, without managing what it meant. When he handed her the box on the stage, she opened it without hesitation. Not because she wasn't afraid. She had simply decided, 2 years ago in a staging area at midnight, that being afraid and staying was worth more than being safe and gone. Inside the box was not a ring. It was a small piece of gaffer tape, cut clean, sealed in a little frame, the corner piece he had reattached to the corridor floor on the night everything began. She recognized it immediately. She started laughing, which became crying, which became the full version of that dry, automatic laugh from the corridor. Except this time there was nothing to push through. There was just him and the stage, and 2 years of arriving carefully, and the beginning of something that would last. Sometimes life changes because someone decided to see, and sometimes the only thing standing between you and being seen is the quiet, patient, deliberate choice of one person not to look away. Don't look away. Sometimes the story that changes everything starts with someone who simply decided not to look away. Share this with someone who needed to hear it today. Ever feel things could change if that moment wasn't ignored? He didn't ignore her when he saw her.